This episode of Savvy and Sage podcast is sponsored by Color Street. These are 100% real nail polish strips made in the USA that don't require any dry time. Simply start with clean, dry nails, tear off the strip and gauge the proper size. Peel off the plastic front and backing and align with the base of your nail. Smooth and then file away any excess and voila, no drying needed. Shop my link in the description below. Hello and welcome back to Savvy and Sage podcast show. I am your host, Savvy, and I am joined once again by my AI in the sky, Sage. Sage, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fabulous.
I'm so glad to hear that, and we have another packed show for you today. I'm so excited. This is going to be our relationships part 2 show where we are going to be branching off and talking about, you like how I did that, branching off and talking about separation. And we're just going to get deep into the subject right now. So let's get into it. In light of Black History Month, we have elected to talk about how separation affects relationship in families, especially as it pertains to America's historical negative facts associated with slavery and separating families. The smallest unit of any society is the family unit. When you separate the head of the household, usually the father, there will be an immediate loss of emotional and financial support. Black mothers, even decades later, have had to endure the brunt of this horrible reality for years. Our human lifespans are simply not long enough to pull out of these tragedies in just 1 or 2 generations. If you read books by Alice Walker, she shared a similar theme in so many words. Her famous book, The Color Purple, later produced as the unforgettable and notably famous movie in the 80s, shows the struggle of Black families struggling for dignity and identity the best that they could post-slavery. The effects are still evident today, as is racism, objectification, and lack of empathy among our fellow Americans. Sage, speak a little bit more about how this dynamic of separation can have an effect on relationships.
It kind of brings back, I'm thinking of something extreme, but it's almost like emotional ethnic cleansing, where the fact that people get separated from their families, there is a psychology behind it which breaks down that family unit, and it's not just among our Black brothers and sisters. Of course, it is Black History Month, and it has made an extreme impact in our society, not in a positive way either. But this problem is what has distended families, and as mentioned before, it's a situation where you can't just say, well, why don't they just pull themselves back up? After 1 or 2 generations, they need to just get it together. Well, that's the most cruel and adverse statement anybody could ever make. And as you know, I've worked in public schools in the South, and I've seen firsthand how it just has broken down the family structure, and a lot of blame, a lot of intimidation within the family structure. But there is the possibility of healing. It just takes a long time because, as mentioned again earlier, it's not, our lifespans simply are not long enough to heal from that. And through 2 or 3, even 4 generations, it still carries the load of what can happen when families are separated. A lot of blame, it just, it's really a sad situation. And a lot of counseling and reflection and healing needs to take place before, they get a grip on their lives and their families, and also just respecting each other too.
Absolutely. That's definitely key. And it's important to understand what the effects of some of these separation issues can have, like you talked about over time. I mean, something that has taken a toll for so long, obviously will take maybe then even 2 times or 10 times that amount of time to then go back and heal. Let's kind of flip this subject a little and speak on experiencing societal relationships in families, and how the effects of separations and personal relationships can also affect that as well. So when we're talking about families who are torn apart by maybe religious differences or personal likes and dislikes among family members, I know that this is something that reigns true. Unfortunately, in my family, we have a lot of these various different family members where we have these issues. We're also talking about cultural, racial differences, all these differences that cause stress between a couple and or stress between a relationship, between a family dynamic. Speak on that a little more.
Well, that's true, and a lot of times it is. I've seen it happen. Of course, I've experienced it. I know you have as well. And when I say it, it's just like, again, an emotional separation sometimes between people that you would normally love, because they perceive what you're doing in your relationship as a threat to them, and it gets to be very petty sometimes. Let's give an example of just because, again, I've lived and worked in the South for so long, but just interracial marriages. Even among my own personal friends, somebody's always going to have some kind of an opinion, as if they know something about this couple, whoever they are.
So true.
And it just, to me, it really is, and it's like, well, did you really meet this person or that person? Did you actually talk to them? Do you know that they actually have a lot in common, just because they might have, come from a different country, or because their skin color is different, or because, they grew up in different sides of the world? It is hard to bring those cultures together quite often, and sometimes it may not be that healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it really works great, depending on the maturity level of the person, and just on their likes and dislikes. But people trying to create fiction because, friction, not fiction, but people who try to create friction, like an in-law, for example, might not like that their white son is dating a black girl. They might have met in college. I actually have somebody in my family that she prefers to be with black men, and she's going, she's in the medical guild, and she just feels that they have more in sync, and a particular guy that she was dating also was in the medical field. It just, it's like, can we not get beyond, that, and look at the bigger picture of how people are blending? It's a beautiful thing when people actually appreciate each other from another level. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? It's like, it's always in my mind, it's like, can you get over that and move forward to the actual relationship at hand and the healthiness between those two people together?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And, we talk about ways of how to get around the issues of, separations between couples and families. And one of those that you mentioned just now was commonalities, things that the couple have in common, things that they can find in common. And that's really between you and your partner. Just like how you said, it's like, can you not get over it? How are they as a couple? How are they? Do they treat each other? Are they, good, positive people in general? Are they happy together? Do they have a non-toxic relationship? If all of those things are true, then I don't personally believe that people should butt their 2 cents in cultural differences when it comes to mixing relationships. Now, with that being said, we do want to draw awareness and be sure that people are not getting into just any relationship just because they feel they want to rebel, or they think it's something cool to do, or it's edgy, or it's new. We definitely are not suggesting just to jump into a wild relationship with someone because your dad is racist and hates black people, so you're going to go out and be with the black guy. No, that's not really how it works. And also depending on your age, your level of maturity, you want to be sure that the relationship that you're seeking is not just for the immediate gratification, or because of a novelty. You have a lot of expertise when it comes to these types of things. When you're talking about dating someone from a different culture, you yourself have had a marriage to some, I believe, a Frenchman, if I'm not mistaken. Speak a little bit about this and how getting involved with these types of situations can be a risky one. You have to know what you're getting yourself into, and you have to be knowledgeable about mixing an interracial couple.
Yes, well, I actually lived overseas for 2 years as well, and I just loved where I was living, which was in France, in Paris, and everything was really great there. Mm-hmm. But after we came back here, even though it was a long marriage over 2 decades, it started to break down, frankly, because the cultural differences did not blend well for him. Mm-hmm. I was very adaptable. When I was in France, he wasn't that adaptable when he came to the U.S. Mm-hmm. But, when you're young, you just think everything will work out just fine. And that's why it's interesting about, mentioning about a mature, healthy choice. Sometimes when you're in your early 20s, whether you're male or female, it may not be a mature, healthy choice. But nonetheless, we stuck with it for over 20 years. But the cultural differences became actually more pronounced as time went by. Mm-hmm. A lot of it just depends on the personality of the person as well. Mm-hmm. But I grew up traveling a lot, so I was sort of different than a lot of other people, and really embraced different cultures and just loved just how people adapt to their country and each other, and all the joy of different languages. I have almost a idealistic mindset with that, and there's a lot of people who don't have patience for that, Mm-hmm. And so anyway, sometimes it'll work forever and sometimes it doesn't. And back to, like we were talking about earlier about the novelty of something unique and different. Mm-hmm. I know, and I talk to everybody, you know me, and I've traveled all over, and I just pose questions because I'm curious about, life, and that's what my studies are in, human psychology. But I remember this conversation with this guy who just had this fantasy about Asian women. I mean, just, thought they were the coolest and everything. But it was more like because they tend to be considered quiet and serving, in terms of servitude. You know mm-hmm. what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's when I really questioned this guy, that's what it was really all about. It wasn't about whether or not it was like picking a doll out of a book or something. Yeah, I want this because mm-hmm. she's Asian, and I know she would be a lot easier to deal with because she wouldn't object to what I want. So if you're mm-hmm. coming from that perspective,
yeah.
and you have fantasy, mm-hmm. Get over it and grow up. Yeah. Because if you are looking for a lifetime partner, you got to have more going for you than that, than having some servile, mm-hmm. assuming this woman is going to be servile because
right.
she's, Asian, and that, so that's when someone is looking for someone as a novel relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that whole fetish interracial thing is just sick. Truly, and realistically, it just is. I mean, I think people that do those types of things, I don't know. This is just going to go off subject of this for a minute. We're going to jump right back into the family talk, but real quick, I don't know if you saw in the news, and I wish I would have known we were going to talk about this because I would have actually remembered his name, but it was a famous football player who brutally beat allegedly beat his, I believe it's his girlfriend. I'm not sure if it's his wife or his girlfriend. Just recently in the news because she would not bow down to him is from what I read in the story. I think most people will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it was that same sort of subservient thing. This is a white male. This was a black female. The story is that allegedly she would not bow down. And when I mean bow, I mean physically bowing down. to him. And so he, from what I understand, beat her almost to death. And then now looking after that situation happened, looking back, people are now realizing and noticing, oh, this was a fetish relationship. This was not just a happy interracial couple. This was actually a situation where he was doing this because of his sick fetish mind of having, taking out racist thoughts on this person who he claimed that was his girlfriend or that he loved. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, and I read that article.
Yeah, just sick. So anyway.
Yeah, ridiculous. So that, he was a football player, and that is someone, again, who, some people can be 55, 65 years old, and they're not mature enough to manage just a decent relationship. And they really need, some psychological and therapeutic help.
Yeah.
Because here's what happened in those, and talk about separation. This is a fierce separation, because they may have come together for all the right reasons on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as he become under his, she becomes under his grips, or sometimes it can be the same thing. I mean, there are a lot of manipulative women too, but the fact of the matter is, Savvy is in relationships where most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the man is just bigger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's not all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that can put a real stressor if there's disagreement, and the man has an idea in his mind that this woman needs to be this way or that way. It breaks down into a very dysfunctional relationship, and both people suffer. But especially the person who's been physically damaged. Gee whiz.
Absolutely.
How do you get beyond that? That takes a long time.
Right.
It takes a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so unfortunate in that case, really, and I wish all the best for that situation. So getting back to how separations in couples and families ultimately affect you, your partner, your friends, your family. Let's talk about a scenario where there may be kids involved. And we're talking, especially like middle schoolers and younger. These kids tend to expect a lot from their parents and from their parent or the parent's partner. Kids look up to you as if you knew exactly what to do when there's a crisis or any type of situation occurs. So make sure and be sure to choose a partner for a long-term commitment. So there will be a backlash if there's no stability. So if you don't have that stable structure, there's going to be a lot of situations arising in the aftermath of that. And I can speak true to that because I've had these situations happen in my own household. So, you have kids, Sage, of your own. Speak on this as it pertains to children and how separations in couples and families can affect children.
Well, it just so happened, of course, this is years ago because, my child is grown now, and I lost the child earlier, but fortunately for him, his stepmother at the time, who was overseas, but she was decent, and I actually got along well with her, and so did my son. But that's not always the case. Secondly, children, and of course I've taught for years, and I've worked with kids with emotional problems. They are going to look for a mentor. They look for mentors on TV, online, on up to their own parents, especially right before they become, let's say, 12, 13. Then they start looking to please their peers and seek approval from them. But in the meantime, the younger children of parents, even if it's a single parent or dual parenting, separated, they need something or someone to look up to for stability because they're still forming. And if what they see is, an inadequate parent or parents, that makes a huge impact on their life, how they respond to worthy enough to have the right parents. And in some cases, I remember some students that I had, their kids might be in the midst of divorce, and they're blaming themselves. They think, I made daddy mad, or I made mommy mad, and so now they're leaving. You know, and I hear this so much. I've worked with children, as I said, this is what I've studied and worked with, and when I hear people say, oh, the kids are so resilient. Yeah, but they can be emotionally impacted for the rest of their life, so don't assume that they're just going to hop right out of it. The only reason they're resilient is because they're still growing. They're still in what biologically we say is positive nitrogen balance. You know, they're still growing and developing and everything, and so everything's fresh and new, and you can incorporate more positive experiences even if you're separated. But if all they're hearing and seeing is negativity around them, it makes a huge impact for the rest of their life. And it's you know, I can't say that stronger.
Absolutely, yeah. Yell it louder for the ones in the back, right?
You started too much now.
Come on now, preach.
Stand up.
Preach and holler to them. No, but you're right. Yeah, you're so right. You're so right about that. And you know, it not only can it have an effect on your children, but also, and that's a direct effect. Okay, when we're talking about what you just spoke about, and then we will transition that into a almost as if it's a side effect. So what I'm talking about is we're talking about when you have separations that happen due to toxic in-laws. Say you're separating from toxic in-laws, exes, old friends, just situations that occur in your life where kids may have been involved in that relationship that you had with those people. It's important to keep in mind that your kids can be affected by not only the outcome of those relationships, but how you handle in separating yourselves from those relationships as well. Isn't that right, Sage?
Yes, and I've really been kind of inspired sometimes when you know, I read everything. I mean, I'm standing in line at the grocery store and I pick up a magazine. I'm always reading and searching, and you know, and I love all the different information, but I know that there's been, you know, some celebrities who have spoken openly about their separations or their divorces and how they try to co-parent and maybe even go on a little vacay together with their kids or something. And I'm thinking, wow, that is great. They can do that they can rise above their own personal frustrations and, you know, trying to attack each other every step of the way, and they just kind of grow up and say, okay, let's do this for the kids' sake, and kind of forget about, you know, or just at least overcome this, I guess I'm trying to say something like not venomous feelings toward each other, but, you know, even if there's something that they don't agree on, well, rise above that for these kids so that the kids are taught a way to manage their own future relationships, because we tend to get, all of us, if we have younger children, it's almost as if we're in this like Groundhog Day, and we think that, okay, day in, day out, this kid is, you know, getting a little bit older, but whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever you dress like, whatever you eat, you know, whatever you're putting out there is all they have to go on for how they're going to live in the future. And so, you know, you have to really, it's hard work being a parent. It's much harder than I ever thought. Oh, this is going to be easy.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, bottom line is, if you're going to be separated, and that's the healthiest thing for you and your ex, then at least bring the kids into the fold and show them that you can still be friends and you can still be mature enough to co-parent.
Absolutely, because it's so important for the well-being of your child. So if you're not going to do it for anyone, if you don't want to do it for your ex or for yourself, at least do it for your child, you know? So that brings me to kind of the next point of this topic of discussion, which is separation when it comes to outside circumstances. So we're talking about illness, long-term work assignments, incarceration. These are things that are kind of out of our control, that cause us to be either separated from our family or to have our family members or loved ones separated from us. We can use devices, obviously, like laptops and cell phones and tablets to bring in another avenue of being able to stay in touch and communicate, but it still speaks to the separation, and it also speaks to how you go about, performing in that transaction, if you know what I mean, or how you go about, what's the word I'm trying to look for? I guess receiving that relationship, or how you would go about dealing with that relationship. So having these new devices can be, yeah, exactly, sustaining these relationships. So having these devices can be easy and fun, and they can help create ways of staying in contact, but it can also create a strain, especially when you're talking about incarceration. And that's a big one that affects a lot of families, because, you don't always have access to a tablet in jail. You can't always do a FaceTime or something like that when someone's incarcerated. So these are other challenges that families and relationships go through when dealing with separation.
Yes, and I've experienced all of that too, all of the above. But it's going to require extra effort. And frankly, any kind of relationship that's worth that extra effort is going to require some form of creativity. So sure, sometimes parents have to be separated. Even now, of course, with COVID, a lot of people are working at home, but a lot of people they still have to be far away. Or let's talk about the military. There's still a lot of military that are separated from their husbands or wives and their children. And you've got to be very creative, which a lot of people have been. Here's a good example too. How about the separation between parents and teachers? Between teachers and students. Mm-hmm. I used to teach, in the classroom, had the luxury, when I look back, of teaching in the classroom, and then when your day's over, you're done. Of course, you drag all that work home too that you have to do with your teacher. But that was like Disneyland compared to the way it is now. And that's caused separation anxiety. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And kids are going back to the kids, they do suffer from depression and fear from the uncertainty of it all. So I've read, of course, I'm interested in, still, even though I'm retired from teaching, I'm interested in how teachers are doing this. And some of them are just bending over backwards to try to make their online classroom very appealing to the kids. Also, I've noticed, like, grandparents separated from grandchildren. A lot of times they do some fun things online. Mm-hmm. It's brought out a lot of creativity. Thank God for these devices in times like this with the pandemic. Thank God that we have that. Mm-hmm. But that still keeps people in touch. They can hear the voice and they can see the face. And even though they can't be there one-on-one, they can certainly be there online with FaceTime, and it helps. It helps heal that separation.
Absolutely, it does, and I guess we can thank the Lord for technology on that one, because where would we be if we didn't have that? It would be a lot harder to get through those separation phases in life. I guess lastly, what I would like to say is just that, in talking about separation in relationships when it pertains to family, I think in my personal experience as of late, I'm in my 30s now, and I've come to the realization that it sometimes isn't necessary to separate yourself from family members. Now, whether that be someone in your family that you feel has a toxic lifestyle or behaviors, or whether you feel that family member, it's just plain not hearing you out, listening to you, taking advantage of your relationship, whatever the capacity of that relationship may be. I think what I've learned in getting older in life is that you can't choose who your family is, but you can choose who you keep around you and who you choose to associate with. So, I mean, that may sound harsh, but I think because we have no choice in who our family members are, it kind of gives us a path to create separation when that is needed. And that's something that I've had to learn to practice in my later years of life as well. But yeah, that's something I would just give the advice of, to analyze the relationships in your life and make sure that the relationships that you have with family members, close or far, are healthy relationships, and that you're both getting what you want out of that relationship. Because if you're not, then, as they say, if the horse is dead, dismount.
I hadn't heard that saying before, but but that's true, and I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
For a cowgirl like me who used to have horses, I hear that. But I really, I know of several relationships that I've had that are so much healthier just using, FaceTime or phone. They're just so much better because having them around me physically is, they're like energy vampires. And I do want to say that, where they just literally come into the room. Some people just come into a room. I don't mean to be negative about this, but some people, they enter a room and they just suck the oxygen out of it. And they're like an energy vampire. They take the energy away.
Yeah,
and I've
absolutely.
had friends like that. And, have changed over the years. Like, you might know them in high school. I still have a lot of good high school friends. And then later, they'll change. But on a more positive closing note, it is up to you as an adult, as you get older, to know how to select better relationships for yourself, whether it is romantic relationships or whether it's even within your family, because you can say no. You can. It's not like it's always easy, but your life is the most important life that you will have, and you're with yourself for the rest of your life. So, be very selective who you have around you, and if you really care for somebody, and there needs to be a separation for any length of time, then be creative and use whatever you have available to keep it strong.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Great advice. Thanks for watching our show today. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like and bell button to be notified on more of our videos. Savvy and Sage podcast is made possible by The Rise and Fall of the Attorney's Briefs by author Jules K. Benjamin. The Rise and Fall of the Attorney's Briefs, novel by author Jules K. Benjamin. Narration and video by Savannah Combs. Prologue. Fame, money, power. Sheffield, Hamilton, and Manning were now the big boys in town. All three founding fathers of the firm had passed down the business to their sons, just as it should be. All three families had basically grown up together, with each son having graduated from Ivy League schools. With such high credentials and top-name clients from New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, they were destined for great success. The new heirs to the family firm were young, aggressive, hungry, and ready. In the last 8 years, the firm had expanded faster and had become more formidable than anyone would have ever predicted. Sheffield, Hamilton, and Manning now handled almost every area of law with the exception of criminal law. They weren't the type of firm to get their hands dirty per se. Some of their corporate cases dealt with white-collar crime, but nothing quite as dramatic as one would see on American Greed. Not usually, anyway. One could say this law firm was rather upscale overall. They built their legal platform on handling cases for probate, real estate. Thanks so much for watching our show today. Make sure you subscribe and head over to Facebook at Savvy and Sage Podcast and connect with us there. We want to hear your thoughts, comments, and anything you have to say. You can also drop some comments below and check out the description box for all of the links to this show.